Hi. So, continuing the general communication skills unit, let's understand communicate. How do you communicate product design and the day-to-day tasks to other stakeholders? Well, communicating product design um, is much more trickier than product vision because design is subjective for a lot of people, or at least is perceived as subjective to a lot of people. Uh, I believe great designs are actually objective because it all culminates down to that one simple, sophisticated, beautiful design. Look at Apple's iPhone. While it came alive 10 years back, over the time, so much has improved in the product, but it still retains its broad form factor. In fact, it changed the entire industry around it. Same goes for almost all the great designed products. They are objective in their final solution because that's like the best solution. It seems to be the best solution possible. So you will be, as a product manager, you will be spending enough time designing product interactions with your product team. You are designing the user experience. You will be designing how people interact with your product and so on. Right now, typically designers are creative. They are ambitious, and you would want to work with such creative and ambitious people, and they can choose to create amazing out of the world designs. But that is where you need to step in, and you need to balance that that crazy design with pragmatic design. You need to make sure that it is balanced, and you need to explain the reason why it should be done in a way uh, that is much more practical, that is much more usable, or not, and not necessarily the most flashy or the most unique interaction possible. Because the more unique the interaction is, there's a good chance that the users do not understand it really well, and that's why they'll not be able to actually use it properly. And to do this, it's very important to communicate effectively with the designers. If you do not explain them in the jargon that they understand, if you simply start saying that, yeah, this design is not so good, I don't like it. No, I don't like the colors. I don't know something. I don't know, but this doesn't look nice. These interactions are um, okay. I mean, we can slide here, we can slide there, we can slide on the left, we can slide on the right. If you start talking like this, the designers are not going to take you seriously. Some of them might be very blunt and say that on your face, and some of them will simply avoid talking to you, and they will be like, "Okay, give us anything. We'll just get it done." And some of them will simply say, I don't want to work with you." Right? So you should be able to communicate what is a good design expectation, what's a bad design, what's a mediocre design. Typically, this requires you to understand your design skills really well, which we have already covered. So you need to understand design theory to some degree. You need to understand color theory. You need to understand typography. You need to understand HCI interactions. HCI stands for human computer interaction. So there are HCI guidelines. In fact, Apple has a very good book on HCI, which explains what makes good design, what makes good interactions. So having a good grip of HCI is going to help you build really good products and be able to communicate with the designers in a language that they will understand. For instance, um, when the newsfeed, for instance, the newsfeed works beautifully for all the products where the user is expected to be a laid back person who just wants to scroll through. That's it. But as against that, it doesn't work very well for all those scenarios where the user is expected to be actively involved in the product, right? So Facebook was designed for that, for the news feeds. As against that, um, let me think. Dashboards, in the business dashboards, they're not designed for infinite scale, infinite scroll. They're designed for fixed set of things because people want to deep dive into each of those charts, each of the data that is coming up. You do not need to be a designer to be able to speak the language of designers. You just need to be able to empathize with them. You need to be able to understand which colors will work for what the product that you're talking about. If the product's broader, um, if the product's audience as well as the intent is to be a much more relaxed product, because it's not for a very sensitive situation. It's not a money product, or for example, let's say it's a product which allows you to trade stocks or to do something with money transactions, let's say. Now money transactions is a sensitive matter. Now you have two approaches. Approach number one, you take the understanding of you take the word sensitive seriously, and you design a product which requires a user, or which signals a user that this site is serious. You need to dive in, you need to take an effort or make an effort to understand what we have done here, which basically means the kind of fonts that you use, the kind of colors that you use, the kind of shapes that you use will signal the user that ex- please make an effort to understand what we have done here. Now, for example, the fonts that you have used are smaller, or the line heights are smaller. The shapes are not rounded; they have sharp edges. Typically, all of these things start communicating or start signaling that they typically signal a little more serious affair, or the matter is a little more serious. Not all the time, it's not hard and fast. It also depends on how it has been put together, but typically it does. As against that rounded sides, a little more balanced, little more breathable text and fonts, and the right sort of vibrant colors can give us a signal that okay, this is a very chilled outside. We understand that transactions and payment transfers are tricky, are they sensitive, but don't worry, we have it under control. We are making it very simple, and that's why this website is very simple, and that's the signal that you can send to your users just purely by using the right design elements. And this um, and this you don't have to sit down and explain to the designer that give me this font, give me that font, give this line height and so on, but you can explain the emotional effect that you want the user to have, and the designer will be adept at delivering that using his designs. Another important tip to here is to have effective communication for product design. It's always important to start small. Don't plan to build something complex right from the get-go. Think in terms of think large, but then also be able to break it down into smaller chunks uh, which you would like to use, which you know that it can be built and will be a repeatable component across, right? um, Also, it's very important to make sure that when you're communicating with a designer, you are communicating the user, the market, the problem, and all other details possible. You can use wireframes and prototyping tools to communicate, or you can simply explain the problem at hand. Designers are comfortable with both of them. Some actually do not like wireframes at all, and some prefer to have some sort of wireframe from the product manager himself, right? So for example, if you want to communicate a particular transition in your app, the transition from one page to the next, so you don't need to know how to do it, but you just have to know why you are doing it and communicate it. So you can say something like, I think this fade in fade out transition is better because the user stays engaged longer, anticipating the new screen. And if you don't fade out, then it is very jarring. The experience is too jarring, and it might sort of shock the user. Taking this a step further, uh, a typical design which that you typically interact with is the surface design, which is on the surface where you're accessing the app finally. The finished product looks at is what you typically interact with, but that finished product, the surface, is based on a skeleton, which is based on a structure, which is based on a scope, which is based on a strategy. The strategy is very abstract, and that is completely the realm and scope of product manager. The product manager will be defining what is the problem, what are the users, and all the other details that are needed to figure out what should be built. From the strategy, you create the scope. Okay, so you will scope the entire strategy into requirements. So the abstraction has reduced now. You're going up. Followed by, once the scope has been defined and the requirements have been defined, then the designer picks it up and starts analyzing that what are the different pieces, what are the different interactions that I need to put together. How will they interact with all these, how are the different elements, different components going to interact with each other. Then comes the skeleton. Then the structure is there. Now the skeleton comes in where the designer further analyzes and starts putting things together. What components will increase the usability of the sites? Where can I add delight? Where can I add a better onboarding? Where can I add a little more signal for the user that, hey, we are with you and this product has been designed for you. And then finally, once all of this is in place, then you finally get the final finished high definition product, or I should say in this context, design. The final product responsibility, the final step, the responsibility is with the designer and the product manager, and the first two steps are completely the responsibility of product manager. When you do so, uh, if I just convert this into known artifacts, the strategy is strategy. Okay, scope is typically defined in the form of a PRD. Structure is broadly the wireframes that you have created. Skeleton, I would say, is the first draft of a complete user journey map where all the elements have been put together. And finally, high definition uh, prototype or final version is the surface. So how do you communicate product design? Well, there are 4 steps to this. You will begin with uh, a sketch where you will create a rough representation of your ideas. You might do it, you might not do it, depending on which company and what's your team's opinion about this. The simplicity of a sketch helps you communicate the main goals, so that you're not discussing and competing and fighting against that. Okay, where should the button be? You are firstly communicating the broad ideas that this is how things are. It's pretty much like when you get a piece of land, you can broadly put together the land should be divided into a garage space and a house and a play area. Then you can go deeper into how big the garage should be, and within garage which element should be where. So once you have the sketch in place and broadly everybody's on the same page as to what element should be included, then comes the wireframing, where you start going deeper and start understanding how this element should be clearly placed together. So the goal here is to prepare your ideas for further validation, so that you can go to somebody who doesn't understand the bigger goals, or cannot visualize at a very high level, and needs some more details to visualize the final solution. From the wireframe, you create the mockups, which are high fidelity mockups. So mockup is still an idea, but it is much more finished. It may or may not have colors. It may or may not be accurately using the right fonts and stuff, but it will still be able to communicate almost most of the stuff, most of the product, most of the final design. And finally, the prototype is a fully interactive product. It is not the final product, but it is a fully interactive product or a mockup which you can use. Typically, it is also interactive and you can use it. You might use light some basic coding, or you might use some existing products like InVision or Marvel to create the final flow. So that is all about design. Let's talk about what are the day-to-day tasks that a product manager goes through. Uh, it's very difficult to just define it. Uh, in a nutshell, I'll simply say you might have to do anything and everything that can come um, in the way of building your product. You might have to go do user persona, you might have to do meetings, you might have to take support calls, you might have to suddenly explain a certain business stakeholder who has suddenly joined the team, right? So on a day-to-day basis, you will have to, you might be working with the release that just happened, and you want to see how is the feature that was just released, how is it performing, so that you can decide what should be built next. You will be communicating over emails across with different stakeholders. You might also have to send out daily, weekly, or monthly emails communicating everybody what tasks to be done, what are the tasks completed, what are the milestones achieved, and you wanted to give a general update about the status of the product, like all across the status of the roadmap that was initially planned. Because typically you'll be planning for a quarter or 2 quarters in one go, and then the the hope is that you will be able to stick to that roadmap, which sometimes happens, which sometimes doesn't happen. But it's your job to communicate and make sure that everybody's on the same page. So to conclude, um, so to conclude, communicating uh, the product design with your designers and with other stakeholders is is tricky, but it's a very important um, skill that you need to acquire. You need to acquire how to talk to the designers. You need to acquire what to talk to the designers. You need to also be able to, you should be able to articulate the design expectations that you have and the logic behind that design. Further, be prepared to do anything and everything under the sun to get your product ready as fast as possible. And for that, on a day-to-day basis, you will be conducting a lot of meetings. So be prepared to take minutes of meeting. Be prepared to be able to type really fast and make quick notes, which you are immediately sending out post the meeting as minutes. The more you practice, the better you will be, and people will really like you if you keep doing this. That's it for now. Thank you.